Well, the Big Ten and SEC are circling like vultures for that power grab, and it might be on the way. Is that all bad news?
You are Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day and your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in this, the greatest sport on planet Earth. So, the Big Ten and SEC, according to a report from Brandon Marcello, over at CBS Sports. See, I got all the reporters' wires names crossed in my head because there's so much news to discuss all of the time. The Big Ten and the SEC are going to unveil grand plans. We don't exactly know when. They're going to change the playoff, kind of, but maybe it'll actually be good. But this looming power grab from the Big Ten or SEC that a lot of people are worried about, there's nothing anyone can actually do to stop it. That's the bad news. But not everything is bad. There could be good things that arise out of all of this insanity. So 2 points. Today, I am optimistic, Spencer. That's me. I'm Captain Optimism over here, trying to find, the happy needles in the haystacks of all of this stuff. The first thing that could be good news is that the playoff could get changed for 2025. Now, this needs unanimous support, but they could change the playoff for 2025 so that conference champions aren't guaranteed the first round byes. Well, that would make a lot more sense. That would be good. Again, small, kind of, it's a small payoff for a lot of, don't like this, don't like that. But that's something. This would mean that the Big 12 and the ACC, who I don't know if they'd get on board with it. I'll tell you why they might, or at least why I think they could in just a moment. But essentially, this would take the automatic buys that we saw for Boise State and Arizona State this year, and that wouldn't happen because it would just be ranked on the playoff committee seating. Now, that's kind of ironic because the other proposal that is actively being discussed is this 14-team playoff. And that model is a 4-4-2-2-1-1 structure in which the SEC and Big Ten each have 4 automatic bids, 2 each for the ACC and Big 12, 1 for the group of 5, and 1 at-large, which is essentially Notre Dame's spot. But in that structure, which is actively being considered, as I said, that actually reduces the power and influence of the committee. It takes it and almost kind of nullifies it because then the conferences could set up these structures with their conference championship weekends and say, hey, we want to have these 4 teams battle it out for who gets the top seat, and then they automatically get placed into the playoff as a result of being in the Big Ten or the SEC. Now, do I think that's great and the best thing for college football? No, I don't. But a good thing that could come of it is, well, if the SEC plays 9 conference games, that'd be something. I'd like to see them do that. Every SEC team playing 9 SEC opponents and all those ACC rivalry matchups that we see, I think that would be really good. It would make the scheduling better. It wouldn't fix the biggest problems, but at least those 2 things would be good. Now, this needs the idea of changing the seating for 2025. This needs unanimous support from the 10 conferences that are there and Notre Dame, who just get to exist and continue to be their own special unicorn sort of thing in college football. I don't know that there's a comparison in any other sport for Notre Dame. Like, can you imagine if the Yankees were not in the American League but could still go to the World Series by setting up their own schedule and having their own playoff structure? Be a little weird. But college football is strange, so that's just where we're at. So Notre Dame and the 10 conferences have to agree that this format's going forward. Now, on the one hand, it's bad for the Big 12 and ACC because the likelihood that they could get those byes, which I don't actually know how beneficial they really were, because I don't know if you noticed, every team that had a bye lost. Just saying. I mean, Arizona State was 1 play away, but they got off to a slow start. I don't know that that's a coincidence. The timeline of the playoff wouldn't be changing here for 2025, but You wouldn't be able to get that extra rest if you needed it, but you'd also be missing out on $8 million a year, which is awarded to your conference by way of a team from your league making the college football playoff quarterfinal. So there wasn't the reward of watching your team play a game and win and know your championship hopes are still alive. There was, however, the conference award for, hey, we have this money, we can, divvy it out as we see fit. Typically it goes to everybody evenly, and, they take a little for themselves as well. So that's why the conferences wouldn't want that proposal to go forward, the Big 12 and ACC, that is. But here's why they might. Right now, the Big 10 and the SEC are yet to reach their full power and influence with regards to the voting structure for all these playoff rules. That kicks in 2026. So maybe you'd have twofold thinking from the ACC and the Big 12, which would be, we don't want to tick these guys off, or they could come back and screw us later. And on the flip side, we miss out on money that we'd get from having our conference champion getting a bye, because a world in which, I suppose the ACC just got left out, but more often than not, the Big 12 and ACC champs would be getting those first round byes. What is the value of getting rid of that versus getting to have a home playoff game for our conference champions? Bet you fans would like that. I'm always trying to think of the fans as often as I can. But the powers that be in college football, they're really not. And that's unfortunate. But amidst this potential vacuum, just massive vacuum suction of power that the Big 10 and SEC could continue to enforce upon the sport, you could have some good things that come of it. That's about as optimistic as I can get. I mean, a 14-team playoff pulses me to my core. I don't like the 12-team playoff, quite frankly. I never wanted that. I thought if you were going to expand, go to 6. Have a couple of buys. You know what I never see suggested, though, after this past year? Shouldn't the ultimate reward for regular season games be a home playoff game? Isn't that clearly the grandest of all the prizes? Getting to play in front of your home fans? Teams with buys, 0-4. It's 1 year. I get it. They won't go winless forever. Teams with home playoff games, 4-0. They won't win every game forever. But over the next 5 years, I'd be willing to bet teams with a home playoff game wind up performing better than the teams that have the bye because it's such a long layoff. If they fixed that, then perhaps it would be different. But let me know your thoughts in the YouTube comments below, or hit me up on Twitter at @SMcLaughlinCFB. So, sometimes I wonder, Spencer, what are you going to talk about on today's show? Well, when Louisville's next quarterback, Miller Moss, is on the show, that gets really easy, and that's what we've got next. Attention Locked On College Football fans, the future of college sports is here, and it's transparent. Before the Roy app, NIL negotiations often happen under the table, and fans didn't have a clear way to directly support the athletes they love. Now with Roy, you get to be a part of that and support whichever school you support and the athletes in the most transparent way possible. We're about to have an athlete on this very show, Miller Moss. If you wanted to shoot a little donation his way, boom, Roy allows you to do that. You choose the player you want to support, decide how much to contribute, and receive exclusive content from the athletes that you back. The Roy app is giving fans control. No more uncertainty. Now you can provide transparent, impactful support and help shape the team and future of college sports with your contributions. Download the Roy app from the App Store and start backing your school's favorite athletes the way they deserve, with transparency, trust, and a real impact. This is the future of college sports. Join it now by downloading Roy and supporting your favorite players. Well, it's not every day I get a special guest here on the show, but that qualifies today. Miller Moss, the quarterback at Louisville, now formerly at USC, joining me here on the show. Miller, let's dive right into it, man. I appreciate you being here, but talk about what these last few months have been like for you. Of course, you go into the season as USC's starter. You got people like me and a lot of others, talking about how great of a match it could be. And by the end of the season, you're watching a lot of those games. What was it like to go through that this past year?
Yeah, it was an interesting experience, to say the least. it was definitely like being my first year as a full-time starter. It was kind of a wild introduction. I mean, obviously, like playing in some pretty significant games, and then just how the season unfolded, and then obviously having the opportunity to come here. I don't think I could have planned any of it. um, but I think, in hindsight, I'm grateful for a lot of those experiences. And I think I'm better for them, regardless if they're positive or negative. I enjoyed some really high highs and had some low lows as well. But everything difficult that I've gone through in my life up to this point has made me who I am. So in hindsight, I've always been grateful for those difficult experiences. So yes, there were some difficult things. There were some really good things, some really fun things. And at the end of the day, I learned a ton, and had wonderful opportunities at the end of the year. So I'm grateful for all of it, and looking forward to a great offseason.
You were a guy that waited several seasons before you got the opportunity to be a starting quarterback for a team. But now, when you first committed coming out of high school all the way back in 2021, the transfer portal wasn't as big of a thing. But now it's here, and we'll talk about that more in the second segment on the show. But what was it about Louisville that made you want to capitalize on that opportunity?
Yeah, I was really lucky, going in the portal, that I had some really good and unique opportunities. I think what really stood out about Louisville was Coach Brom and his pedigree of developing quarterbacks. I just think when you universally look for advice, and I talked to people that I really trusted in, they all said the same things about Coach Brom. His ability to develop quarterbacks, the degree of difficulty of his offense, how his offense will push you to learn and prepare for the NFL. And I got that feedback from a college and NFL level. So I think there's just the consistency of feedback. And then obviously, Coach Brom's message to me as well, was what really pushed over the edge at Louisville.
When you're talking about an offense being, more complicated, more this way, more that way, what exactly does that mean, and how are you attacking that here in the offseason?
Yeah, I mean, there are obviously like some technical things. I think just sheer volume counts also, in terms of, how many plays you carry within the system, and then also week to week throughout the year. I think, there are some NFL based things that Coach Brom does that some college systems don't carry, for the purpose of, whether that's dumbing it down or playing fast or whatever it is. Obviously, everyone has different philosophies, but Coach Brom really pushes his players to have a unique understanding of his system. In order to play well in the system, you have to be able to comprehend offense. And I think that's pushed me in a lot of unique ways. And, I'm excited just going through it, like coming home every night, watching the film, going through the install book. Like, it's really pushed me to be better. And kind of circling back to, why I made this decision. Like, I wanted to go somewhere for a year and, eliminate distractions, go to work, and become the best football player I could be. And I've kind of seen that unfold over the past month or so.
When you went into the transfer portal, you were one of the more high-profile quarterbacks that had entered, and I think there were a lot of people talking about, hey, could you go here? Could you go there? Could you go to this? I saw a report that, he's going to Michigan. I have no idea if that's accurate, of course. Yeah. I just read and report here on the show. That's kind of how this whole ordeal works. But right. How did it come to be that Louisville was the one that stood out? Because I presume there was some legitimacy to, there wasn't just one school that was interested in having you be their quarterback, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, like I said, I was lucky to have a bunch of opportunities at a bunch of great programs. I think for me, like, I tried to see through the name brand and the logo, and go to a place that, really was going to be the best for me, regardless of, maybe outside perception or whatever it may be. I'd kind of done the deal where I played for the sexy brand name school. And I think maybe in picking that school, I overlooked some obvious things that maybe weren't the best for me. So I think just in sitting with my family and the people that I really, trust and value their opinions, we really wanted to make a concerted effort to make this decision for all the right reasons. And I've been very happy so far.
How much of that decision was rooted in Coach Brom versus, maybe the roster that, you're going into, or what kind of preparation do you do when you're making that decision of, hey, they've got these receivers coming back, or this guy's there, or I expect them to be this, or look at what they were this past season. They were an 8-4 team. Now some people, maybe or maybe not the host of this show, I don't know, I can't remember, some people predicted Louisville to go 8-4 this past season, right on the money. So that was the expectation for some. But how much did the non-coach factors, but still football related, play into your decision to be a Cardinal?
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely a decent amount. Like you're not going somewhere to go 6-6. You don't. That's not the goal. And I think when I looked at the construction of the roster, with the backs coming back, with a really solid tight end and Nate returning, and then obviously Chris Bell and Colin Lacey coming back at wide receiver, we added some talent in the transfer portal defensively that I think is going to really help us out. And yeah, I mean, I think I got to spend some quality time with some guys on my visit here. Got to go to a volleyball game with Chris and Colin. Our volleyball team is actually really good. I don't know if anyone followed. I didn't really follow college volleyball until I went to the game and realized we were really good.
Volleyball's electric, man. I'm here for. Have you been to a volleyball game before? Because it's fantastic action.
Not really. I mean, maybe not since middle school or high school. But yeah, it was cool. We're really good, so that was awesome. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's very hard, especially in a sport like football. Like this isn't basketball where you have one star player, and it's like an Anthony Edwards at Georgia situation where he can kind of carry the team and he's going to shine regardless. In order to be great in football, like you have to have a really good supporting cast around you. So that was absolutely something that that I weighted in making the decision, and I think we have the talent here to be really successful.
When you came in and kind of had let everybody know, like, hey, I'm here. This is what is all going down. Were you buying beats for the offensive linemen and dinner for the receivers, or like how was that transition for you to just kind of introduce yourself? Because you've got just the 1 year of eligibility left, right? And right. So this is your last hurrah in college football, but in that time you're trying to establish yourself as a leader, get to know these guys, and get really close with them. What has that aspect of it been like so far?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. I think, for me, I've always viewed leadership as something that was earned. I've always kind of seen people that prematurely step into leadership as something that's not necessarily inspiring to those they're trying to lead, if that makes sense. So I really tried to come in and just demonstrate to the locker room that I'm, I think sometimes the quarterback gets put on a pedestal, and that's just the reality of the game. They're going to get the credit similar to the head coach, and they're going to take the heat. And for that reason, in a lot of ways, they're put on a pedestal. And my biggest thing coming in was just show the team that I'm going to work really hard, that I'm the same as everyone else, that there's no hierarchy to this, that I'm just as important as the kicker, as the walk-on, as the coach. You know what I mean? And just really help promote, a positive locker room culture. And I think, when your team sees that you're willing to lay it on the line for them, and you're willing to do everything it takes to go win games and be the best version of yourself, then you can then step into that leadership role. So I think like I said, my attitude towards leadership is that really has to be earned. Because, you step into a locker room of 100 guys and you haven't demonstrated that you can lead them. You haven't demonstrated that you're about them and that you're going to put them first. It doesn't matter how talented you are, how good of a player you are. Like those guys aren't going to back you when stuff hits the fan. And like, you play in these big games, like I've, had the opportunity to play in, and there are some of those moments where like you really need to lean on each other, like you're down 2 scores at half against a top 10 team or whatever it is. And like, in those moments, you really have to know that the guys you're stepping out of that locker room with have your back and that you have theirs. So that's really how I've tried to approach it. Obviously, we've got a long way to go and a ton of development to go. But I'm happy about it so far. Coach Reno's done a phenomenal job along with the rest of the strength staff. So we're getting ready for spring and excited.
Have you won any weight room battles yet?
We haven't really had any weight room battles. We do we do like mat drills and conditioning and stuff, and obviously that gets competitive. We do these kind of games within speed drills and stuff, but I guess we do like the hangs and whoever can hang dead hang for the longest. I didn't win that. One of
Gotcha.
the little slot receivers won that, but he might have me on the body weight, so it might be a little easier.
Yeah. I mean, I might have you on the body weight, but I bet you'd win if we went up.
I would hope so.
Up and did it. Yeah. Well, if you want more from Miller Moss, stick around because there is more coming your way after this. First, this episode brought to you by Fabric. Life moves fast, especially when you have a family. One day you're watching your kids take their first steps, and before you know it, they're off to college. That's why securing their future is so important. Fabric by Gerber Life makes it simple to get term life insurance that fits your family's needs. With Fabric, you can apply for term life insurance online right from your couch. You could be covered in under 10 minutes, and in many cases, no health exam is required. You get peace of mind, and as a parent, that's what you're looking for to make sure your family is financially protected no matter what happens. They've got affordable coverage. It goes beyond life insurance as well. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their families. Apply today in just minutes at meetfabric.com/lockedoncollege. That's meetfabric.com/lockedoncollege. Policies issued by Western Southern Life Assurance Company, not available in certain states. Prices subject to underwriting and health questions. Go check out Fabric today. All right, Miller Moss, quarterback of the Louisville Cardinals, joining me here on the show to wrap up. I want to talk kind of some off-field stuff, Miller, because this is a wild time of college football. I was discussing earlier on today's show that the Big Ten and SEC are just kind of deciding, do we want to take over the entire sport? Do we want to have all of this power? Do we just want to do that? And there isn't really anyone that can stop them. And the portal was rolled out, and then it's just there. And NIL was rolled out, and it was just there. From just a player standpoint, how crazy is it to go through this wonderful, beautiful sport, as I say in every show, the greatest sport on planet Earth, and have to navigate all of that kind of as it evolves in real time?
Yeah, it's wild. And I think, I've been, lucky, however you want to phrase it, but I've kind of seen it evolve throughout my college career and evolve fairly quickly. Whereas if I got recruited, 2 years later, that recruiting process looks very, very different. I would hope that ultimately that decision would come down to the same things, but there were different factors in play, and I think with the ability of players to just up and leave an unlimited amount of times, I don't know. It's crazy. It's really wild. I think it's moving more and more towards the NFL model, but then you have, the element of the fact that these players are students. So, I think there's a lot more to be seen in the entire landscape. Obviously there's a lot to get into, but I think as a player, the most important thing has to remain being the best possible player you can be, and focusing on that day in and day out, and kind of let, all the other things that you can't handle, you have to understand that, it's all going to work itself out in some kind of way. But it's been wild. It's been really, really interesting to follow.
I think some players are more students than others. What was the famous Cardale Jones quote? I didn't come here to play
school. Yeah.
I didn't come here to play school. Yeah, this is a good point. If you know you're going to be 3 and done and off to the NFL,
no doubt.
Suddenly that geology class just doesn't seem that important for your future career endeavors, But so you brought up something really, really interesting though, and that's that when you were recruited, class of 2021, coming out of the state of California, NIL and the portal weren't there. Realignment wasn't there. You were going to play for a Pac-12 school, Miller, and by the time you were starting, you're in the Big Ten. What are we doing here? How did we get there? It's just kind of it's all wild and such. But if you were in high school right now, getting recruited in this environment with the portal in mind, with NIL in mind, what do you think would have been different for you, and what do you think you would have wanted to do different?
It's a really good question, and I think there's a couple different approaches. The first approach would just be kind of similar to how I approached it in high school, which is, these are the schools that I see myself developing at. These are the schools where I feel like I can go play big-time college football and have the opportunity to win at a high level. There has been a a kind of an emergence of a new model, especially for quarterbacks that I've seen. And you see, I mean, Cam Ward being a good example. The kid who was his backup at Washington State that went to Oklahoma.
John Mateer.
Yeah. Where, and I think you've seen this kind of throughout college football, where if you go to a somewhat smaller school out of high school, you get the opportunity. You see that with the Tulane quarterback going to Duke. You go to a somewhat smaller school, but still playing on a big stage against quality opponents, and you get the opportunity to get on the field quickly. You saw this with Will Howard, going from Kansas State to Ohio State.
Right.
You get the opportunity to get on the field early. You get your feet wet. You have film. You're an experienced starter. And then you use those 2 or 3 years at that smaller school as a springboard to go play big-time Division I college football. And so I think that's been an interesting avenue for kids. And I think it's largely because these established programs like, Notre Dame's taken a fifth-year transfer, X amount of years in a row, where you see these schools, they recruit these, 4- and 5-star kids, which, I was lucky enough to be thought of as that in high school. You see them recruit these kids, but then you see them go out in the portal and they say, okay, this guy is a proven product. We've seen him play major Division I college football against competition with live bullets. And in a lot of ways, they trust that more than what they see from their developmental kid on the practice field. So I think that avenue of getting on the field early, getting your feet wet, getting experience, and then going to a bigger school is really interesting. And I think you're going to continue to see that, especially with, the money factor involved, because people are paying such a high premium to get, high level quarterback play out of the portal.
Yeah. No, and Darian Mensah is the guy that you were referring to, who reportedly got an $8 million deal for 2 years to go play quarterback at Duke. And I mean, look, I'm here for investment in college sports. Like, no matter what the sport is, if you've got someone that wants to make a big donation and say, hey, I want this program to be great, awesome. I saw the other day, James Harden was making a donation to Arizona State because he was looking at the landscape saying, I want him to be able to get kids. I want him to be good. And, you either, I don't know if you're a movie fan, but I love the movie Moneyball, and it's adapt or die. Like, that's the world that you kind of wind up with there. But all this off-season stuff, college football's off-season, of course, goes from January to the end of August. It is the longest 7.5-month stretch in the history of humanity. But we soldier through, and spring football is like almost here, and we'll get a little taste. We'll get a little taste, and we'll get just a little bit closer there. But with all the off-season noise, plenty of fans get discouraged sometimes that there's too much movement, there's too much money, there's too much real life, there's too much this, and at some level, I get it. But for you as a player, when you go through this whole ordeal, sorting out, all right, not starting here, gonna go to a different school. This school wants me. I'm gonna take the visit, and going through the recruiting process again. But then eventually, you're gonna just step on the field just like you did a season ago or in high school, and there are gonna be 70 to 100,000 people screaming at you either that you're great or that they want you to screw up. How do you block that out? Like, how do you keep the football kind of at the center of everything you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, that hasn't necessarily been difficult because I didn't get in, like I could have taken a different route, you know what I mean? Like, I could have gone to school, gone to college, gotten a job, whatever it was. Like, I could have done that, and I chose to play football because it's what I truly love to do at the end of the day. So for me, that's almost a relief to, okay, I don't have to worry about any of this stuff, and I can just go do what I'm here to do ultimately. So, I mean, I think for a lot of players, it has to come down to what's really important to you at the end of the day. And I think that's a lot of times the differentiator. And I think you used to see that at the NFL level, and now you're seeing it happen early and earlier, where there's a split between talented kids who are in it for what it brings you and talented kids who are in it because they love what they do and they love the game. So I think it really comes down to, your priorities and how how much you really care about playing football and what that means to you at the end of the day. And you can only fake that for so long before the other stuff catches up with you.
Yeah. Do you want to try to play in the NFL?
Absolutely.
How do you get there?
Go have a great year.
Yeah. Do you have a last thing, and then I'll let you go, and I've appreciated the time, my man. But do you have a target so far, before spring ball that you feel like you're going to look up at the end of the year and that guy's going to have 1,500 yards receiving by the time the curtain comes down on the season?
Yeah, I mean, it's always hard to single one guy out, but I think Chris Bell is going to have a really, really big year for us. I think he ended up somewhere around the 800-yard mark last year, and he's really come into his own, as a leader in that room, and as kind of a veteran presence on our team. And I think, he's going to have a heck of a year.
Miller Moss, quarterback at Louisville, man. Appreciate the time. Thanks so much for coming by the show.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me.
Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time, and until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.